Hello everyone and welcome back to the channel. I'm sorry I haven't been really active lately. I just started back in school and I'm kind of getting adjusted to working, doing school, and also trying to practice piano and do work. So I'm sorry that I've been inactive, but I got a couple things going right now and I'm super excited to get back into it. That being said, I wanted to start back up with an album review, and Danny Brown's new album just came out, You Know What I'm Saying, and I thought it was pretty good. I thought I had a lot to say about it, so I just thought that this would be a great video to start with. So let's just hop right in. The theme of ego has been around for a while now, since hip-hop has started. Especially since My Beautiful Dark Twisted Fantasy. And Danny Brown talks about the theme of ego, and he makes it really sound interesting. And he talks about it in a way where not a lot of artists do. So it's really good to see something talked about that's in a really refreshing way. And his last album, Extrosity Exposition, dealt with his ego on drugs and what it meant to have an ego on drugs and kind of ignoring all the side effects that drugs have. And that was done really well. I love that album, which really got me into Danny Brown. And this album, it's more him off of drugs and him having gone out of rehab and still off of drugs, and him still having an ego and life not being good. And that's really interesting to see. The album opener really sets off the album in a really well way. Starting an album is usually seemed like really hard thing to do. Preparing your audience to draw them in and to let them know what is coming up is just a very hard thing to do, and he does it really well in this album. I didn't really like the album opener in Extrosity Exhibition, but he does it really well here. Going back to the theme of ego, he does this really neat thing in this album where he begins the album not really alternative, but as the album continues, it becomes so much more alternative and a lot different than other albums, which kind of represents and tells a story of itself of how he kind of needs his ego to stay happy. Another thing that this album does really well is, as you get to see both sides of the spectrum of having an ego. Usually in Atrocity Expedition, all you saw was really his ego. In this album, you get to see a lot more of emotion in him off of his ego. When he is not on his ego, you usually hear some sort of instrumental cue to let you know that it is not his ego. Usually you hear an actual instrument or a violin or something like that, and it was really, and his voice isn't really high or doesn't really have a unique flow, which when his ego comes on, it's a lot more alternative and has a lot more unique flows and switch ups and things like that. There's a line in, or even the chorus of Three Tears of There's 3 tears in the bucket, fuck it, of him saying that he doesn't really care about his emotions, really goes to show of how his ego lets him ignore his emotion. It's really done well and really interesting to see. This album is also extremely catchy. Being an alternative album, I did not think it was going to be this catchy. There's a lot of samples and a lot of different sounds and unique hooks, and yet this album pulls it off. One of the best hooks on the album is Savage Nomad, and it is literally the weirdest hook I have ever heard ever, but it is done really well and it's really catchy. The transition between Change Up and theme song is really done well. Some of the transitions on this album are fantastic. It's a pretty well-produced album. There are some songs that needed to be more well-produced. When you have an alternative album, I think production is very important, because if you have an alternative sounds, you need to hear those to understand what's fully going on with the sounds and what's really going on in the song. Some of the production could have been done a lot better. A good example of this is Shine. Some of the sounds and hooks were really underproduced or overproduced, and it could have been done a lot better. The features on this album are great. The one with Run with the Jewels and 3 Tears is just fantastic. I mean, he does an amazing job on this song, really capturing what Danny Brown's trying to go for. There are a couple really big down things about this album. I thought Dirty Laundry was terrible. It did not have a consistent tone. It wasn't really catchy. The main hook in this song was like an video game-ish, computer-ish sounding hook, and then the bass is more like a clap drum, and it's just really weird. It doesn't have a consistent tone, going to kind of like dark emo sound to a very positive sound. It's a very, very weird constructed song that just doesn't really sound good at all, especially in the position of this album. Like I said, the main tone of this album, or the main message with the music telling a story, is that as the album continues, it becomes more alternative. This is the 3rd song into the album, and it is not placed well correctly in the album, because really the first 2 songs set up at like an alternative jazz, kind of not that alternative, but still pretty alternative, and then you hear this song, and it is just weird. I think that this song would have been a great album closer, showing how it is probably arguably the most alternative song on this album, kind of symbolize and show the main message of his ego is kind of coming back, and kind of how he needs it. Would have been really interesting to see. I have no idea why it's the 3rd song on the album. The album closer, Combat, doesn't really close the album that well. I don't think it kind of closes and brings all the themes and all the sounds and all the flows and it kind of everything you just heard. It doesn't really wrap up that and give it a good ending. Other than that, though, this is a pretty good album. I kind of love it. I'm going to give this album probably an 8.7 out of 10. It was really, really good. I really liked it. Yeah, that's all I have to say. I'm working on a Parks and Recreation video that should be coming out in probably the next following week or something like that. But let me know what you guys thought of this album. Did I miss anything on the album? Am I doing anything wrong? But yeah, just let me know what you guys want to see next. If there's any more albums or things that you want me to do, I'll be happy to do them. You guys have a good day. Thank you. Bye.